This is my presentation on Hildegard E. Peplau by Kylie Ackerman. Hildegard E. Peplau was known for her theory of interpersonal relations. She was born on September 1st, 1909, and died on March 17th in 1999. She was known as the mother of psychiatric nursing. She was born and raised in Pennsylvania, and she stated that she witnessed the flu epidemic, which may have influenced her choice to go into nursing. Facts about Hildegard E. Peplau. She was the only American to serve as the executive director and president of the Nurses Association. She had a bachelor's degree in psychology and studied psychological issues at a private psychiatric hospital that was located in Pennsylvania. She was first a summer camp nurse, then a school nurse, before she chose to serve in the Army Nurse Corps, where she focused to rebuild the mental health system in the U.S. by passing the National Mental Health Act. Due to Hildegard's interest in the mental health epidemic going on, she began working on her interpersonal relations theory. This model focused on reducing stress through interpersonal interaction and really focused on the nurse-patient relationship. This graphic shows the values that the nurse holds and the values that the patient holds and how they work together to form that relationship. Peplau's nursing model identified 4 phases in the interpersonal relationship theory, 1 being the orientation phase, 2 being the identification phase, 3 being the exploitation phase, and 4 being the resolution phase. And then we are going to dive deeper into these 4 phases in the coming slides. The first phase is known as the orientation phase. This begins when the nurse and patient first meet. They discuss to figure out what the problem is, and they also decide what can help that problem. This is done by asking questions, sharing past experiences, such as how they coped with situations in the past, and the patient must seek assistance for this problem. The nurse then identifies the problem or the problems, and they seek available resources for the patient to use. Once the orientation phase is complete, we then move into the second phase known as the identification phase. This begins when the client independently expresses the feelings and begins to feel better about the problem. They then select resources that the nurses found for them, and they begin dealing with this problem, which helps decrease the feelings of helplessness they may be feeling. A vital part of this identification phase is discussing goals and giving the patient goals to reach. Once the goals are set in the identification phase, the patient then moves into the exploitation phase, which would be the third phase. The patient then seeks help from the resources provided, and they begin to feel like they are helping and begin to understand the underlying problem. The nurse is still aware of communication and continues to help the patient progress towards the final stage. When the goals have been met in the exploitation phase, the patient then moves into the resolution phase, which is the final phase. The patient is independent from these resources and no longer needs help from those resources at this time. The patient's needs have been met and the goals have been completed. Once the goals have been met and the patient no longer feels the need to use any of the resources, the nurse-patient relationship is then terminated. In conclusion, Peplau's theory allowed many other health professionals to form these relationships in a therapeutic way for both the nurse and the patient. It had strengths and weaknesses. The strengths of this theory is that it allowed others to develop this therapeutic relationship through this 4-step process so they could focus on the interpersonal relationship. A weakness this theory had is that it did not focus on health promotion or maintenance. It strictly focused on the relationship between the nurse and the patient and how the patient benefits from a therapeutic relationship from this nurse. How is this theory used today? This theory is most likely used whenever we communicate with a patient, whether we are aware that we are using it or not. During admission, we are in the identification phase. We have first met the patient and we are discussing their problem, and we are thinking about the resources we can provide them with to help solve this problem. During the identification phase, we are identifying the correct resources to provide them with assistance. The patient begins having a feeling of belonging and starts dealing with the problem using the resources that we have given them. In the exploitation phase, the patient really takes advantage of those resources and begins using those resources as a way to solve their problem. The nurse is still used in the exploitation phase as we help them move towards the goal in the final resolution phase. In the resolution phase, we discuss how their goals were met, and we usually end up discharging them, which helps terminate that nurse-patient relationship as they go home on their own and become independent once again. 2 questions for the viewer after watching this presentation would be, who would be an example of someone who would not benefit from using this theory? In other words, what might they be experiencing? And question number 2 is, based on Hildegard's background, why do you think she was interested in promoting interpersonal relationships?